Hi, Mariam.
Hi, Christopher.
How are you doing? Sorry, it took me a while
I'm
to
doing
find you,
good.
but I'm there at last.
Yeah, I was just messaging you here to come online and be on live. So yeah, how are you doing and how's the day in London?
Yeah, it's okay. It's been super hot weather all week, and then of course when the weekend arrives, it's raining. So I'm going to be spending most of the day indoors today, but excited for our conversation as well.
Yeah, same here. It just took us some days to do this, but I'm glad that you have joined in and for taking out time. Thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Christopher Wilton-Steer. This is the third episode live for Instagram series Uncut Conversations. Today's guest is Christopher Wilton-Steer. He is a travel photographer based in London. His professional and personal work has taken him to remote and less documented places. For those of you who are joining now, I'm just telling us about the person I'm interviewing today. In his quest of exploring, he wanted to explore the different less documented areas where he can bridge the cultures, and his work has also been published in National Geographic, The Lonely Planet, Financial Times, and the list goes on and on. But one best thing about his work is that he explores the untouched cultures, the places, and the people, and the experiences that he is joining in. So thank you so much for taking our time. So what is the story behind taking this passion? Was it your personal calling, or was it what you always wanted to do? As I read in an interview that came in recently, that it was something that you took in 20s and then you started doing that. So please enlighten us with that.
Sure. Well, when I was a teenager, I wasn't in photography or anything like that. I wasn't in dark rooms or getting that interested. I remember doing creating a pinhole camera at school, and that was kind of exciting. But that was the extent of my knowledge about cameras. And then in my early 20s, just on trips I would take in the holidays when I was at university around Europe, I would. I took kind of throwaway cameras with me, which were, a thing back then, and you could just get 24 shots and then see at the end of the holiday what you could produce, and that was always a thrill. But it wasn't until later on that I started traveling a lot more, and I'm a very visual person. I tend to remember the details, the visual details of things, and I found that I guess I was sort of not recalling that much from my life generally, and I found that whenever I took photographs, it was a way of kind of I could hang my memories of those photographs. So I just needed to see one photograph, and then suddenly how I could recall the past came back to me very quickly. And so it was really a tool to sort of document my life and things that were interesting to me at the beginning. And then I started working with an organization called the Aga Khan Foundation. And we work a lot as you know, in Pakistan, but also in other parts of South Asia and Central Asia and East Africa and West Africa and the Middle East, etc. So I started traveling a lot for the foundation, and I work on the communication side of things. So I like to photograph myself rather than rely on others, because I would meet people, interview them, and then write up stories about them. And so if I had the photograph, it kind of, I could create a more complete story. So I started photographing for the foundation, and just, people started asking for it more and more. When you visit again, could you provide us some new photographs? And before I knew it, even though it is not in my job description, never has been, I've sort of become a unofficial photographer for the Aga Khan Foundation. And so these trips took me to unusual parts of the world that otherwise I might not visit. And then just my own curiosity and my own holidays and my own trips that I would book. I like to go to places that, that not really holiday destinations, but places that are full of, that are interesting to me and that I was keen to learn more about. And it's just sort of built from there. And then I started, submitting work. I remember the first article, the first time I had it published in a major newspaper.
How did that happen?
Well, I was very fascinated by this district in Cairo called Dar al Ahmar, and I first visited it there because the Aga Khan Trust for Culture had restored several mosques and monuments in the area, and so I went to go and visit those with a delegation from the European Union. And I was just walking around, and this neighborhood was just incredible, beautiful neighborhood. There's artisans making things everywhere at the street level, a little bit like the walled city of Lahore, but even more artisans around. And I just thought, this place is incredible. Like, no, I've never heard of this place. You know, there's no tourists around here. And so I thought, I really want to document this and maybe have an exhibition about it. And that kind of happened later. But I spoke to a friend of mine about me visiting there. He lived in Tunisia, and he's a writer, and so he had said, I want to come with you. I'll write up the story, and we'll try and get it published. So it would be my photographs and his words. And we at best hoped we maybe get something like an article in an in-flight magazine or something like that. And we submitted it to loads of different newspapers and just, hoping for the best. Never thought anything would happen. And then fortunately, The Guardian just jumped on it and said, we'd love to publish it. So we were like, wow, this is amazing. Like, we're getting published in The Guardian. Like, this is a big deal. And we were thrilled, we were so happy about it and couldn't believe, we thought it was such a, it is a difficult thing to do, to get an editor you don't know, you're contacting them out of the blue, to get them to even respond to you is hard work. But for some reason they wanted to publish it, but then that kind of opened the door for other things. And I pitch things all the time, and I don't even get a response from a lot of newspapers ever.
Same here.
Yeah.
I always pitching it.
Yeah, you get it all the time, but occasionally, something happens. Like, I had some pictures of Iran published by The Guardian recently.
Yeah, I saw that. Resealings.
Yeah, and I said, the reason, I said to them, there's a new BBC series starting on next Monday called The Art of Persia. I have these photographs. Would you be interested? And within 10 minutes, they wrote back and said, we'll take them. Because, and then you realize if you can make it relevant and topical right now, then you stand a good chance of a better chance of getting things published.
Yeah, that's like always believing on your own work and then pitching relevantly to the publications. That's a very inspiring journey that you started out. If you have to define yourself in 3 words, considering your journey and where you are in life right now, how would you do that?
3 words: curious.
Yeah.
I'm trying to. What's the other words I could use? I think really just curious. I'm just going to go with that. I can't think of a better words for it, but that's really the. The other thing is increasingly just trying to be authentic to myself, and to what I mean by that is that is following my own passions and interests, even if there isn't a clear career path there, because it scares me all the time. I think, how am I going to do this? Like, I don't know, but it's something I really enjoy, and I don't know what the future will hold, but I think if I can follow my passion, good things will come of it. Better things will come of it. It's good for me personally, but also when I know I'm putting that much effort into something, then it kind of takes on an energy of its own, and hopefully it takes me somewhere interesting in life. Yeah,
that's like being curious plus having an authentic voice and letting the path guide you, having that faith. I think that's how artists, writers, photographers work. They just let things unfold in their due time, having that faith. So your degree is an MA in arts and architecture, history.
Yeah.
And how did that help you in your passion when you started out, or was that not that helpful? The degree and the education.
Yeah, I think I often think about this, and it's difficult to be able to say certainly, but I studied art and architectural history, and in some ways I wish I'd studied art or architecture, rather than the history of it, because it's a more vocational career. but I didn't, and you know, that's fine. But when you're studying art history, obviously you're looking at paintings, you're looking at things like composition and color, and perspective and all of these things, and you learn what makes a good picture just through simply looking at enough pictures and people showing you how they design these compositions, how they do these, you know, these 3D perspectives, etc. And I can't say exactly how, but that must have permeated into my mind, and it must inform the way that I take pictures. And then in terms of what interests me, you know, I guess I'm getting closer and closer, really. I love to do portraits, but I've increasingly started doing more stuff around architecture. And I don't really want to be an architectural photographer because it feels like a very narrow point. But the way that I photograph buildings and people's interaction with those buildings really interests me. I mean, architecture and its impact on us as individuals and how it shapes our behavior and our moods and our well-being has always been something that has fascinated me. And so you know, photographing beautiful historic buildings and learning how and seeing how people interact with them and capturing that as well is definitely of interest to me. And hopefully it's of interest to other people as well.
No, they are very interesting, the way you photograph the buildings and their architecture. Plus, you also were in Pakistan in January in the old Lahore city, and you had a series of people working there. Would you like to share that experience? And I read in an interview that you thought that Pakistan would be a dangerous place because of the media.
Yeah.
So how did that change your perspective?
Yeah, no, it's good. It's I'm glad you brought that up. Well, there's two things there. The trip to Lahore was again, I'd visited, I think, the year before, and I saw what was being built, what was being restored there, on the Mughal picture wall. And I thought, wow, this is a really good story. Like, you know, we've got to pitch this to, and so, you know, to some newspapers. So my friend who I did the Cairo piece with, Harry, who's the writer, he and I pitched this piece to the Financial Times, and they said, yeah, we'll take it, about artisans in the walled city, but also a lot of those on the restoring the picture wall. And so that's how that piece came about. And I just thought, you know, you've got all these young people who are like between 20 and 30, all with quite different skills, like art conservators, engineers, chemists, fine artists, architects, and, you know, mostly actually probably more women than men. And I thought, this is a side to Pakistan you just don't read about in the international press. And it's super cool what's happening there, and I wanted people to know more about it and to share that story. I just thought this is a great story. So that's how that happened. But you brought up a question about how Pakistan was a dangerous place, and that's right. You know, when my first visit was in 2015, and I remember arriving in Pakistan, and I'd come via, I think, somewhere like Qatar. And the plane was landing on the runway, and then it sort of landed, then took off straight away again. I thought, oh, Jesus, this is scary. I'm not a very good flyer, you know. And then it landed again finally, and I thought, you know, when you're somewhere new, you've never been before, and all you have is these negative, you know,
media portrayals and preconceived notions.
And I was thinking to myself, what are you doing here? Like, this is, you know, this could be, you've got to be really careful. You've got to do this. And then I spent 2 weeks in the north. I spent a little bit of time in Islamabad, but mostly 2 weeks in the north of Pakistan, in Gilgit-Baltistan. And
even that photo, even that picture behind you is from that trip. Yeah, that person, I saw that in the newspaper.
Yeah, he's from Baltit Fort. And so I just had the most incredible and revelatory time there. You know, it opened my eyes, not just to how wrong I was about Pakistan or what I've been led to believe, but also just how wrong I was about many things in life. You know, that I knew at this point that everything I thought I knew about places and people that I'd never met or visited before was probably false, and there was a whole nother world out there. And it's a very, you know, what's the word? You know, it's a very humbling experience, that. And I just remember thinking, I need to I need to be careful with how I make assumptions about things in the future. And so Pakistan was a massive learning curve for me, and I came, you know, it changed my life in lots of ways, visiting and having such a wonderful time, and just visiting somewhere so staggeringly beautiful that again no one talks about. And so yeah, that I've been happy to visit Pakistan many times since.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I made this Instagram page was that to showcase the writers, as I'm a writer and poet also, to show that there's this picture of Pakistan also that exists in a positive branding, so that people like you can see the culture exchange and what work we are doing here, and so that the things that are not put in the media should get a highlight of what we are. So it's good to see that one person has a changed perspective about our country through your journey. What was your experience like in Iran, and how has your travel changed you as a person when you begin and now when you see? Like, there's a photograph of you before all this journey started and photograph after the journey. So how has that shaped you up?
Okay,
India.
I'll talk about Iran first. Iran, you know, again, was a country I was worried about visiting. Lots of people said to me, don't go to Iran, you know, it's a dangerous place. And to, you know, at that time, and this was before the whole rocket missile issue with the Americans more recently, but at the time when I was visiting, there was a problem with, in the Straits of Hormuz with, you know, these oil tankers, and Britain had kind of kept one of Iran's oil tankers in Gibraltar. And so I was a bit anxious about the whole thing, about going, because I thought I don't want to be some pawn in some, you know, kind of political high stakes diplomatic game. Like, you know, I'm coming into the country with all this camera equipment, you know, I'm on my own, I'm a British guy, like, what the hell is this guy doing? You know, they could spin it in many ways if they wanted to. And so I was worried about it, and I had a drone with me actually, and so of course I sent, when I was in Turkey, so I sent that home because I thought, this is bad news. If they catch me with a drone, then I've got, you know, really nothing. You know, it's going to look very guilty. But but as a British person, when you visit Iran, and it's the same with if you're American and Australian and several other countries as well. You have to have a guide with you, and that guide is approved by, or a guide company that's approved by the government. And so I was with an official guide, and he was a wonderful guy, and we had great chats. And you know, even people said to me, "Don't talk about the government, don't talk about politics." We spoke about nothing but politics. You know, I mean, it was at the beginning I was very careful, but before, you know, after a few days, you're suddenly, you know, having big discussions, and we were driving around and having a great time. He was a wonderful guide. And you know, people in Iran were like, you know, like many parts of I'm tempted to say the Islamic world, were just incredibly hospitable and kind and welcoming, and curious about who I was and where I was from and what did I think of Iran, and all of this type of stuff. And so I had you know, an absolutely wonderful time there. There were a few strange moments where, you know, you're not allowed to go and just visit somebody. You know, if it's off the itinerary, it's a problem. Like, you have to stick to the itinerary. So the irony is that if I was French or Irish, I don't need a guide. I can just go to the border, get a visa on entry, and just do what the hell I like there. But as a British person, it's much more controlled. But overall, I had a wonderful time there. I definitely recommend it to other people, and I will hopefully go back at several points of my life. You asked about how it changed me. I think I had already been changed by that Pakistan experience that I mentioned. So for me. And
did you have tea, a specialty?
What, Pakistan?
Yeah.
Of course. All the time, you know, and enjoy that very much. And it's funny, in the north, or maybe not only in the north, but in the north they drink it with salt as well, right? Which is quite an odd experience, but I got into that too. But I mean, in terms of change, I'd already been changed. My eyes had been opened by that Pakistan experience of realizing how wrong I was about, or how wrong a lot of us are about what we think about the world. You know, nothing beats your personal experience. So the whole trip, I went with that mentality of just you know, everyone says don't go to Iran, don't go to Turkmenistan, so I'm going to go to those places and find out myself what life is, you know, like as best as I can. So so this really just reinforced a lot of what I already had begun to understand or begun to learn about about different parts of the world that don't have a good reputation in the UK or the West or whatever it might be.
That's interesting to know. Obviously, traveling changes a person, even if you're traveling solo or even for the career. But congratulations on Liverpool winning yesterday.
Well, I'm a Man United fan, so I'm not happy.
Yeah, I was
about
a Man U fan, but yeah, I was sad. But empty stadium and the pandemic times we are living in. But yeah, how do you see yourself in future with this uncertain times and the pandemic we are living? Do you think that there will be projections about traveling, or it will be restricted to virtual traveling? How do you see that?
Well, you know, you may know more about this than I do, but you know, I feel like I keep getting surprised by how bad it is. You know, I keep thinking, oh, it's going to get better, but then you know, I saw today the number of people in India just alone was like 400,000 or something like that, and that's probably a massive underestimation. You know, that's just people that's been tested. So. And you know, in Pakistan, I know that there's, you know, in the major cities as well, it's a big issue at the moment. So, you know, everything is really to do with the vaccine. So I don't know when that. I was on a webinar recently listening to a guy from the Lancet Medical Journal, and he said it was 50-50 we would find one by the end of the year, but hopefully, if not, by next year. But then you've got to make this vaccine and distribute it, and everyone's got to take it, because or else it's going to be very difficult to travel around. So yeah, I'm a bit worried about it, to be honest. I mean, Europe seems like it's more accessible, and so I may have to focus my energies on Europe for the next you know, year or so.
Yeah, and they are making the vaccine trials in Cambridge, Oxford University. They're in the third or fourth phase.
Yes.
But yeah, being hopeful is the only thing that we can do right now. Do you think that if you have to talk about your first exhibition and the third, that Silk Road journey that you have taken from London to Beijing, what was that experience, and would that exhibition be taking place in London? I don't think so. It's taking place.
You mean the Silk Road exhibition?
Yeah, Silk Road. That's the latest one, and the first one was in Madagascar, your first exhibition.
Yeah.
And the second was in London. Yeah, tell us about that. That's
right. So yeah, the first one, I took a trip to Madagascar probably, I think in 2016 or something like that, and I was there mostly to photograph cocoa farmers, because the foundation was supporting the cocoa value chain and improving the quality of cocoa, and you know, and helping produce chocolate. And so I had a wonderful colleague there who I went around with, called Farah, and she now works in the London office with me as well. And she's a very kind of, you know, she's a real mover and shaker type person. So she had this idea, and she has contacts at the Institut Français in Antananarivo, the capital. And she was like, we should have a photography exhibition and get the president to come and get all the, you know, the people, you know, potential donors to come and things like that. So she just said to me, you know, we'd love to do an exhibition with your photographs. And I was like, great. I mean, I never even saw the exhibition. I saw photographs of the exhibition, but I wasn't there myself. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, you know, it can go from just an image into something that sits on the wall, like here, you know, and people are looking at it and enjoying it. And I thought, okay. And that's when, you know, when I was in Cairo, and then it helped me have the idea of, like, I want people to know about this place. I want them to experience it. And so I started planning this one about Cairo and this district, and I had that at the Royal Geographical Society in London. And it wasn't just photographs. I wanted people to have like an immersive experience as best they could. So I had recorded the sound of artisans working and of the street sound kind of, you know, horns and radios playing, and, you know, so that when you walked into this space, you saw the photographs, but you had this sort of soundscape of what it's like to be in that district of Cairo. So that was kind of fun. And then I remember somebody saying to me, "What's next?" And I said, "Silk Road," because this was a trip that I'd always kind of dreamed of, and it was kind of, you know, it was a big, ambitious kind of plan, almost too big. Like, it scares me sometimes when I'm thinking about this exhibition, which I do all the time. So now I've done the trip, and I've got this 40,000 photographs, which I'm trying to, you know, distill into an exhibition. And the plan was to have it near our office in King's Cross as an outdoor exhibition, because I wanted everybody to be able to come and visit it, not just, you know, people who you know, I wanted it in a public setting. And the plan was to have a linear exhibition, so that you walk from one end to the other, so that you could walk from London to Beijing, basically, and learn about the kind of people, places, and cultures in between. So you take a journey yourself through these photographs. And anyway, that was, I was hoping to have that in July this year, but, you know, coronavirus came and everything's kind of shut down, and so I'm looking at it next year now. And I'm still interested in this outdoor exhibition, but sometimes I think it's such a big project that I'm looking at other ways as well of thinking how to kind of digitize it and make it more of an immersive experience.
Maybe you were virtually the sounds, the photographs maybe can be in with the videos or something, if the coronavirus doesn't go away. Maybe that's just plan B. But this is a really good idea, exhibition Silk Road.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just want to be able to bring it to life, because, you know, ideas are ideas until they become something, you know, physical.
Yeah. Really missing the physical world and the human connect that was beyond the screens. And as a traveler, you must be missing that, because I think real journey experiences when you're in places in reality, not like with the photographs or that will take away the experience. Yeah. But if you have to choose one country other than England where you're currently living, what that country would be, from East Africa or China or Asia or Pakistan or your travels, which country would you like? You don't have to take the name of after England.
Okay. Well, I think two would be. I love Italy very much. You know, I feel very peaceful when I'm there, and I'd love to live in the countryside of Italy for some time, around Tuscany or Umbria. It's just, you know, these beautiful. It's just a gentle place, but you know, it's wonderful weather, good food. You know, it's not such a commercial life. You know, people are able to relax and enjoy themselves. There seems to be a sense of community there that maybe. I don't know, in a place like London, it's so intense here, and you know, it's like in a major city. And then, yeah, I'd probably say Italy is my number one. Maybe I'll retire there.
And what about the places you have documented? Tajikistan, Iran, Afghanistan, India, Pakistan.
I mean, I love traveling to Pakistan for obvious, you know, I mean, I love to be there. I think I'd like to live there for a period of time, but I'm not sure I'd want to spend my whole life there. And then, where else? I mean, a period in Zanzibar in the east coast of Africa would be an enjoyable few months. I think it's, you know, beautiful seaside and good food and nice people. India, I have a lot of love for as well, and would like to spend a bit of time there. Too many places. I lived in China actually for a year when I was 20. My first job was in Beijing. And so I mean, that's really where the Silk Road idea first started, because I often thought when I was there, I was thinking, wow, imagine if I could go back to the UK, but overland. And of course, I never did that. I was 24 and I would just fly occasionally back and forth. But when I flew over, you'd fly over places like Siberia, and you know, you were more north than when I did my trip. But I'd look out the window and think, wow, imagine doing this by land. And that's really when the idea probably first started. And then it took, you know, another 12 years before I eventually did it.
I think most of the best ideas come when we look backwards and see what's missing in the puzzle way. But yeah, that sounds really interesting. Your first job and the places that you've chosen. I've noticed in your photographs, you always choose photos that are really intense, or they are like simple joys, like a person, an old man, architecture that's having history of old times, like the latest one, Iran ceilings. Would you like? How do you process which pictures you have to take? What is the process of your photograph taking journey?
Sure. Well, you mentioned, yeah, I love historical things, you know. I like to, you know, my interest in things like Artisans is based on the feeling that what they do as a sort of group is produce quite unusual and handmade, beautiful things that have, not only in the way that they are made, you know, there's a historical technique. That technique may be 300, 400, 500 years old, you know. So in a way, through their work, you're able to look back in time and see how things were in the past. And I think that's quite a precious thing. And similarly, what they are producing, the designs they're using, not just the way that they're doing it, but actually the designs they're creating. Again, they can tell the story of something that is, you know, centuries old. And so that window into the past, I find really fascinating. And similarly, you know, historical architecture does that. And so, but also when it comes to artisans, there's that sense of fragility. Like, you know, their livelihoods are very fragile in the modern economy. You know, those kind of goods aren't so attractive anymore, and they're reliant very much on tourism, which in the current context is more or less non-existent. So I do worry for the future of a lot of these crafts, because once that technique is lost, it is not coming back. And so they're very precious to me, but I think they're precious to society as a whole as well. So that's my interest in documenting and capturing them. And then oh, there was another part to the question, but I've forgotten what it is now. People.
Yeah, people, and what is the process of your photographing the subject you choose? I think you mainly choose the simple joys, but in a very subtle way that I've noticed in your photographs, like connecting back to the roots and the human connect that is missing in this fast-paced life, which I think I might be right in the way you choose your process and the subject matter of a place, a culture, and people. Yeah.
Well, you know, I'm completely. When I'm in London, I'm not inspired to photograph at all. It's very disappointing because I live here, but I'm not interested in what is familiar to me. I'm interested in things that are unfamiliar to me, and when unfamiliar to me, you know, this curiosity rises in me, and I have a great sense to reach out to people, so that when I travel and I see people that are interesting to me, you know, my way, even if we don't speak the same language, my way of making a connection with them is through taking a photograph. And really, I want them to be you know, they become my heroes, like this guy here, you know. I want to show him in all his glory, and because, you know, for me, he just seems so fascinating and interesting, and I want to share that with people back home who you know, who don't know, so, you know, who won't know as much about these cultures. So I love to photograph old people as well, because they're the most receptive to me asking to take their photograph. Oh, and maybe I feel more relaxed photographing old people. When there's young people, you know, if there's I don't know, if young people maybe get the wrong idea, or I feel like I'm giving off the wrong idea. So I find older people easier to photograph, but more challenging, and perhaps you know, I should focus a little bit more on is people that, you know, younger people younger than me, or my own age, or, you know, around that area. But usually I just spend a bit of time near that person. I show interest in whatever it is that they're doing, and make them feel a bit more comfortable with my presence. And then after a while, you know, just kind of making eye contact with them, not using my camera, maybe taking some pictures of other things, but not them. And then eventually, when I feel that they're a little bit more sensitized to my presence there, then I'll, you know, point at the camera, point at them, make a little joke, and then, you know, and then start to photograph them. And then, if I can, begin to kind of move them in the way that I want them to, you know, either move myself or move them, or ask them to put their hand here, you know, show them what I want them to do, and then go from there, basically.
And there was this photograph of yours on your website that was taken by someone in Jaipur in a World War One style.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, what was that story about? It's like a very World War-ish time, but yeah, it fascinated me because, as you said, you're fascinated to take photographs of old people, and this subject of yours is also taken by a person who is not young.
No.
It's a photograph in Jaipur where they're photographing World War Two. What's the story about
exactly. That? So he's a guy called Tikam Chand, and he owns a beautiful kind of, I think, yeah, like a World War One, World War Two box camera. You know, it's on a tripod, wooden, and then there's a box, and then you have a little lens on the front, and so he, you know, you sit for him. And then he takes the cap off the lens, and then lets
like
the light.
Like in old times, with the lights. Like in the old times, you used to have those cameras with the flashlights.
No flash. He's just maybe at night, but in the daytime, he just takes the cap off, lets the light go in. He counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever he thinks the amount of the light is, closes it, then because it's exposed onto something inside, I don't know the whole process, then he puts his head in the back of this box with this, you know, rug over the top of him, so no light goes in, and then inside he's mixing it all up in this water and doing all these negatives and things like that, and then about 10 minutes later this picture begins to emerge.
Oh, so this is a photo.
So you have this lovely old kind of style image, and you know he's probably in his 50s, and he learnt it from his father, and but you know his children aren't interested in it, so which is sad because when he finishes, and he doesn't, you know, the money is. He says, I'm not doing this really for the money. He makes a little bit, but I think it's more just he enjoys it, and it does give him some income. But you know, this is his thing. So I'm glad I actually was thinking this morning, God, I hope I can go back to Jaipur before he finishes and get a few more of these made, because they're just beautiful images. I love the way the quality of them. You know, not that they just have a certain historic kind of vintage look, which is lovely.
It actually felt like you were a soldier from World War One time when I saw this photograph. I was like, then I read the story. But yeah, I really love the vintage style, old style things because they were more humanistic in their approaches, without any effects, without any filters, and they had to be taken in less seconds. There was more patient process, and there was more human connect of storytelling. I think that's why we go back to the old things and that era and those storytelling. But yeah, last two question is that any one story that you would like to share while you were traveling that was like magical, because there are always magical things happening when we are traveling, and and as a person, any cherished memory from your childhood that shaped you up, or that is your happy place in times like these?
Sure. Well, I could talk about. I think I put it in one of my interviews. I can't remember which one, but anyway, when I was traveling from northern Pakistan across to China,
I read that.
I was sitting next to this lovely old man, and he was a real kind of I don't know, old style kind of geezer, and he was wearing one of those, I can't remember what you call these hats.
Turban.
Yeah, no, but in northern Pakistan, they wear with the roll here, and he was wearing a shalwar kameez, and so I had some dried fruit with me, and I'd share it with him, and he just sort of, he didn't speak English and I didn't speak Urdu, so we didn't really have much to say, but he was appreciative. And then when we crossed the Chinese border, we went in our different directions, and I'd never thought I'd see him again, but when I was in Kashgar, I walked around one of the streets and I saw him kind of haggling with this Uyghur shopkeeper, and I couldn't really understand what was going on. But when I looked closer, I could see that he was selling antiques out of his suitcase to this guy, And I was kind of like, wow, you know, this is amazing. This guy's literally crossing the border to sell goods in China. Like, this is like some Silk Road mythical kind of thing happening here. This is what's been going on for literally millennia. And I thought, no, this stuff doesn't happen anymore. You know, now it's big, you know, trucks and freight and all the rest of it. And here he is, an individual who's crossing the border to go and sell things in China. I just thought this is amazing to witness this on this trip that I'm taking. And then when he finished haggling, I kind of tapped him on the shoulder, you know, thinking, I don't know if he'll recognize me, but he kind of looked at me, and then the recognition came to his face and a big grin, and then he came up and he hugged me, and it was just a really beautiful moment, and we kind of just looked at each other for a while, and then I just said, can I take your photograph? And I didn't even take a very good photograph of him, but I just wanted one photograph of him at least. And then we just kind of went on our different ways, and that was it. And I'll probably never see him again. But it was a lovely moment, and I'm glad I was able to kind of witness it.
That's really fond memory of yours that you shared. Thank you for that. And as a person, last question, the last two questions. Does traveling affect your family life? And any cherished memories from your childhood that you go back as a happy place?
Sure. Well, does it affect my life? I think it probably does. In that, you know, there is a wandering kind of nature to it, and that, you know, there's a restlessness to it. There's a need to keep going to new places and learning more, and that means it's quite difficult to stay in one place and have one life and one relationship. And, you know, that there is a certain sacrifice in that respect, or compromise is probably the better word. You know, maybe one day my wanderlust will cease, and I can settle a bit more in one place. I think I'm still just searching for my place and searching for my path. Still, I'm not fully where I want to be, but I'm enjoying the journey nonetheless. And then in terms of childhood memory, you know, probably when I was a boy, around, you know, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, that sort of age. My father, he traveled a lot. I mean, he traveled way more than I have. He traveled, I think, up to about 170 or 80 countries in his life. He worked in publishing. And so he would send me postcards from everywhere that he went. And, you know, they weren't long essays about, he just said, you know, I'm in Rio de Janeiro, you know, had a cup of tea, had a coffee, now I'm off to go and do this. But
I love the postcards idea. I wish that can be revived in today's world.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the postcard is but back then that's all you had, you know, apart from maybe a fax machine. But I didn't have a fax. I was a boy, so of course I didn't. But he'd send these postcards to me and my brother and sister when we were at school. And I guess in some way, you know, it was a nice way for him to say, I'm thinking about you, even though I'm away. But in some way, receiving these postcards from Timbuktu and Rio de Janeiro and, you know, Beijing and Taiwan and all these kind of far out places, you know, in my mind was creating this kind of map in my head of the world and the places that my dad went to. And, you know, I loved my dad very much. He died about 9 years ago, but and I was very close to him. And you know, in some ways, I think that informed and kind of led me and, you know, directed me to travel as well. You know, or gave me a curiosity about the world, which I'm still, you know, enjoying at the moment and pursuing at the moment.
I think he is living through your legacy of photographs and the postcards that he left behind you to carry on that legacy of photographs. So I think you have taken that from him, the atlas, the maps, the curiosity and the wandering soul. On that last note, any advice to the aspiring photographers, travelers, any recommendations and how they can have this career path that you have embarked on the last note?
Well, you know, you just got to keep practicing. I mean, that one is obvious. I think creating a website is actually a really good thing to do, because Instagram's great and all the rest of it, but a website, I don't know, it just, for me, when I made one, I felt like, oh, I'm officially something, you know. I don't know, a website does make a difference. And creates a place where you can do longer form stuff. Like, you know, Instagram's just so instant, you know, by its very nature. Having something which is a little bit more deliberate in the way that you want to shape the way that the world or those interested in you will see you, you know, on your website, where you can put together your writing, your word, your pictures, you know, in different ways. I think it's important for self-expression. And then, you know, trying to get things published. You know, sometimes when I started, I thought this is an impossible task, but it is possible, and it's just about persistence, and also about making your work relevant to the moment. You know, it doesn't always have to be relevant to the moment, but like I gave you with the Guardian example earlier, if you can make it topical, what your photographs are important right now because of this reason, then you have a much higher chance of being published if that's what your, you know, one of your objectives is. So I would say that, yeah.
Thank you so much for that inspiring journey and for sharing with us and for taking out so much time. I really appreciate this, and thank you for doing this, and thank you for everyone who tuned in. Thank you so much, Christopher. I hope you had a lovely time with this interview and conversation.
I did. Thank you, Mariam. I appreciate you you reaching out to me to ask. It's been fun talking to you, and yeah, look forward to catching up soon.
Yeah, I hope we can do a writing, photograph, or some collaboration if future has that idea. But thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay, bye. Bye.